All right, guys. So welcome back to class. This is going to be This is week two, start of week two. So I hope you're surviving well. And if you have questions, email me, comment on the videos. There'll be things to discuss and questions to ask and that kind of thing. I realize not so much so far, but when we get to Play-Doh, there will be a lot more space for you to ask questions and have discussions and that kind of thing. And there's an Ask Me Anything thread where you can just ask me random stuff, and you can comment if you want to comment or ask questions about anything in the videos. But the last video was really important, the last series of videos, the sort of day two videos, because that's where I taught you what to do with what you read in your opinion. And I put that's on the handout right here. And I said last time that if you do that, if you just practice just what's on screen here, just this section and this section down here, just from here to here, if you do that, you're going to have a B in the class. Now, this handout goes on for another page, and I'm just gonna kind of zip through the next part. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the next part, because it's less important. It's how you get from a B to an A. It's sort of fancier moves. And so I just want to kind of introduce you to what's going on in there. So you have some sense, like a preview of what's going on, and some other kind of tips and suggestions. But actually, if you can just have the what you read and your opinion section of that handout down, just practice with that for the rest of the semester. Do that in all your paragraphs. You're going to have a B. You're going to be fine. But if you're interested in what going for the A looks like, let me kind of show you some slightly fancier things that you're going to need to know about. So let's take a look. So next up is considering objections. This is the students have the hardest time with this. It's very difficult for students to do because I think students, it's enough work. And that's why that's more of a thing you need to do to get the A. If you just do what I taught you so far, you can get a B. If you just explain what you read clearly and then tell me what you think about it with reasons and examples, then you're going to have a B. But for the A, one of the fancier things you can do is called considering objections. It basically means that you start a paragraph out by saying, some people would disagree with me. Here's what those people would say. And then you follow it up with, here's why those people are wrong. It's very hard. I think a lot of students have a hard time knowing what they think. It's hard to figure out what you think. Sometimes you'll see a movie and you'll like it, but you'll hate a movie, but you don't know exactly, you just think it's boring. But like, it's hard to really explain why you didn't like something. And it takes a lot of work. The considering objections part is tough because now you're supposed to imagine what someone else who disagreed with you would say. Like, a lot of my students feel like it's hard enough to figure out what they think. It's even harder to imagine what someone who disagrees with you would say. Because now it's hard enough to put what's in your mind on the paper. Now you gotta imagine what a totally different person would say. And I think that for a lot of students, that's kind of exhausting. But it is a key part of papers. It is, by the way, a trick that will triple the size of everything you write. So if you've written too little and you need to make your paper longer, if you do this trick, this step, the considering objection step, it will triple the size of every single thing that you do. Why? Because what makes the considering objections part hard is you're essentially writing a whole other paper for someone that disagrees with you. Because you got to say the other person would probably quote this part, and they would probably give these examples, right? And you're essentially putting, and they would probably say they believe this because blah 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 blah. So you can imagine. We talked about this a little bit in the last example about the guy that doesn't like superhero movies. You could give a lot of space in your paper to saying what you could do some research. Do people think superhero movies are juvenile? And you could go do some research and you could find some people that disagree with you, that think superhero movies are for kids. You've already had to imagine a little bit why he thought superhero movies are just for kids. But you could spend a lot of time on his opinion before getting to yours, where you could stop in the middle of your opinion and say, this guy would disagree. He'd probably say all this stuff about power and responsibility and war. It's still just kid stuff. It's not like serious philosophy. It's not like it's just the movies say they're about responsibility. They say they're about power. They say they're about war, but they're really just stupid shit to eat popcorn to. So you have to spend a lot of time, and then you say, here's why these people are wrong. And then you have to explain why they're wrong. But do you see how having someone who disagrees with you, you got to give them examples, you got to give them reasons, you got to give them opinions. It's like a whole mini paper in your paper. And then you got to say why they're wrong. That's a whole mini paper in your paper. So you imagine writing a paper that's just, I love superhero movies because, and you do a whole paper like that. And it's only 1 page long, and your professor wanted 3 pages. So how are you going to make it longer? Well, you take your 1 page paper, which is superhero movies are, I love superhero movies because. And then you add it. Page 2 is, some people would disagree with me. Here's what they would say. And page 3 is, here's why these people are wrong. But you got to do a whole page of why someone would disagree. My students love to do 1 sentence or half a sentence. You got to do like a whole paragraph, a big thing. And then you got to say why they're wrong. My students love to say why they're wrong very quickly. But you got to spend a lot of time, examples and reasons and all of this stuff. So that's one of the tricks for making your papers longer. And also, I should say, to back up, something I forgot to mention earlier, is the example that I gave was, the professor said something, superhero movies are for kids, and you wrote a paper why you disagree. I often find it's easier to disagree than to agree, because when you disagree, you're talking just about yourself. When you agree with somebody, it's a little bit tricky because they said something. You can't just go, I agree, and stop writing. You have to say, I agree because, and then you have to have reasons and examples, but they have to be your reasons and examples. You can't just repeat what they said. You have to kind of add to it. So the trick is if you agree with somebody, you have to say, I agree, and also they're right about this other thing over here, and you have to take the conversation somewhere else. So if somebody, so let's just say, for example, this guy says superhero movies are just for kids, and I agree with him. You can't, you don't have a paper, that's too short. So you got to say, I agree with him, and actually, he's even more right than he knows, because it's not just super, it's all summer blockbusters are for kids. That's what summer blockbusters are. They're movies for kids to keep them entertained in the summertime when there's no school. And so you can agree, but you got to add something. So he was talking about just superhero movies, and you add in this idea about all movies, all summer blockbusters are for kids, or all big budget movies are for kids, or whatever. Or you can say, yes, they're for kids, and the adults that watch them are being like treated like kids, and you can go on a whole thing about that. So when you disagree, you could just give all your own reasons. But if you agree, you have to add something new to the conversation. In this case, you could talk about all blockbuster movies, or how, yes, adults go see them, but aren't those adults kind of basically just like big kids, where it makes you feel like a kid or whatever. So you have to add something into it. Good. Okay, so I'm going to kind of keep zipping through this thing a little bit. So the other things down here was, the next thing is something I already said. Write your paper so someone not in our class who has never read what we have read can follow everything. I already talked about that. In the conclusion, what I've taught you so far is sort of the most important bit, right? Which is you discuss what you read and then discuss what you think about it. Teachers like to spend a lot of time teaching students how to write intros and conclusions, but they're really very simple, and I don't like to spend a lot of time. I don't think it's worth spending a ton of time on because it's not super important. I feel like writing a good intro or a good conclusion is like having a good handshake or wearing a tie to a job interview. The really important thing in the job interview is, can you do the job? So I think it's not like as central. But I do want to say, there are things you can do if you'd like to know what to do with the conclusion. And you just summarize what you did, and then you say what you would do if you had more time. So if you had more time, you might re-interview people who go see these movies, or you might have read this other book. And if you had more time and space, so you have a 3-page paper and you did something, and then you say, what would you do if you had a 10-page paper? What books would you have read? What would you have added? And that's really what goes in the conclusion. Good. Another thing is that a lot of in your college papers, teachers are going to give you prompts, right? They're going to say, write about this. A very simple step when you're finished with your paper is you have to make sure each one of your paragraphs connects to that prompt. It's the only way to make sure you're on topic. Sometimes you can get on a tangent and go on a little rant by yourself. But if you've been given a topic by a teacher, like you will for paper 1 and 2 in this class, and paper 1, 2, and 4, cool. If that's happening, where you've been given a prompt by a teacher, you need to, one of the last things you should do, or not last, but as you go, make sure each paragraph somehow connects to that topic. All right, cool. We're doing pretty good. Can't quite see where we are, and we're doing good. Oh, sorry. Anyway, so I think that's where I'm going to stop here for this video, and I'll pick it up in the next video. Yeah.